the thing, friends, let's talk about how do we play in the sandbox? What about some unique, maybe even just plain old simple strategies where we can go sell the shit out of our business today on the Logistics Life. My friends, we have some great people. We got Jared and Nate from eCarrier Check back with us today, and we're going to talk about some simple sales strategies, some ideas, some processes, some flows, some workflows that y'all might be doing that we just think is going to crush it this year. Boys, welcome.
Dan, what's up, brother? What's going on?
Thanks for having us, man.
Oh, of course, buddy. You know what? This is so long overdue, guys. I mean, just for everybody watching and listening, boys, I think we've been back and forth like 15 times. Like, shit, this isn't going to work anymore. Can we do another day? Oh, no, Jared's away. Oh, no, Nate's busy. It's like, it's unreal, right? You ever notice that there's like these times in life where everything just is like, oh, you got time on Wednesday? So do I. Perfect. Let's do it. And like these things happen. And then all of a sudden you get with people and it's like, okay, I got this. And I've noticed a lot this summer with like friends where we're like, hey, do you want to get together this week? No, we're busy this weekend. Oh, we have this weekend. And then my wife and I are like, well, we're busy this weekend. It's like all of a sudden, do we really have to plan something a month out for friends? Like, what the fuck?
What are you doing? Yeah.
You know, it's funny you say that. I love this because I actually set a meeting request in my personal calendar for my wife and I to talk the other day. Our soccer schedule and school sports. And she goes, what's this at 8:00? And I go, how about you and I just have a cup of coffee and hang out? And she was like, she goes, ooh, you got a good point. Like, and you can tell in her body language, she was like, we have been grinding. We're like, we grind out parenting. I mean, I could like write a book about why to not let your kids do 2 sports at a time.
oh, brother. Yes. Oh, yes. And then when your kid, so are you at the point where they're in different locations at the same time?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're doing the old divide and conquer parent technique. Yes.
It's brutal. I got twins that are 13 years old, and boy, they're both in school sports. They're boy, girl. Forget it. It. So the setting, I think this is kind of an interesting conversation because I think being intentional with your time is probably one of the more difficult things to do as we fly through the day. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. Well, you know what? This is a great segue to playing in the sandbox we want to talk about because, you know, one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of people these days is like, how do I find time to keep my sales up? Right? We're seeing shifts in the industries. You guys are probably seeing it. Volumes are starting to pick up. Things I feel are starting to happen a lot more. For all of you out there that maybe things aren't starting to happen, I promise you it's coming. But I'm noticing a lot more things just in my day where I look up now and it's like, you got to be kidding me. It's 6:00. Like, where the hell did the time go? And I'm looking at my to-do list. And I think part of it is me. And I'd love to hear your guys' point. And I'm looking at my to-do list and I'm like, I'm halfway done from what I wanted to do today. And then obviously the next question in my head is, did I screw the pooch today? Like, what did I do? What did I do to mess up? Like, and what I'm finding, to your point, Jared, is I'm going, I didn't allocate enough time for this task. Like, and I do it in every part of my life. Like on the weekend, we had a truss underneath the deck that I think over the winter water got into it and it cracked it. So all summer I'm like, I'll fix it. And then finally this weekend I said to my wife, because I have a honey-do list, which y'all probably got too. I have a honey-do list that I had to get done. Yeah, you guys are laughing. I know you got one. I allocated on my calendar an hour. Well, like 3 hours later, I'm finally putting the final boards on, right? And I look at my wife and she goes, an hour, right? And I'm like, well, I mean, I was close because, you know, I can't admit that I was totally off base.
That's so good. Yeah, honestly, like Nate and I, this is so interesting. And we work 8 feet from each other in kind of a shared cubicle. And, you know, you think about, you know, you're answering the phones, you're doing demos, or in a broker's case, you're booking loads and you're sitting there, you know, going from call to call. Oh, I need a bid on this load and I got to call this guy. And in some particular cases, you're right. Do you spend enough intentional time going, man, I just need 30 minutes of clear silence where I can go do prospecting, or I go call the carriers that I need to. And there's a lot of automation that we see from, check call automation and things like that. But sometimes it's hard to trust that works.
Right.
It's hard. We're in that period where, would you go get into a driverless cab right now? You know what I mean?
No.
So we're just trusting. We got to trust AI. We got to trust some of those automated functions. But it's an interesting time where if you don't take that time to set up that, you know what, Nate and I got to break this down and got to kind of divide and conquer when it comes to splitting up tasks.
Yeah. 100%. And just to add to that, I think it's just like really what happens with a lot of people that I've been talking to. It's just stress. I know I should have did this today, but I was going through all these check-in calls, sales calls, didn't get it done. Now I'm stressed because I didn't get it done.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of stress in people right now.
Yeah, I agree with that, boys. I've been doing a lot of productivity work probably over the last couple of months, more than I've probably done in my career. And really looking at this idea of productivity and how do we ramp it up? How do we do more with less time, kind of thing? And one thing that's starting to really become apparent, it's something I've talked about many times, and I try and tell every sales rep, like, no matter what's happening, if you schedule your follow-up. So like I'm on a sales call with one of you guys, for example, right? And it's like, okay, I'll send you rates by today at 12. If I send them to you by today at 12, will you have a chance to look at them tomorrow? Yes, I will. And, okay, so if we talk tomorrow at say 1 o'clock, would that work? That'll work. And then you send the rates in the invite. I find when you do that, you don't miss at least your follow-up. So, no matter what's happening today, you're still taking, even if it's a small step forward, inch by inch, anything's a cinch, right? And it's like this small step forward. And I think what I see anyways a lot, and I'd love your guys' opinion on it, is like as a salesperson, we sometimes neglect that very critical step. And then what happens if it's not scheduled, it doesn't get done. And then all of a sudden it's like the end of the week and you go, and I'm sure you guys have done it because I've done it hundreds of thousands of times. At the end of the week, you go, oh, I didn't call Jared or Nate this week. Oh my God, that was such a close deal. I almost had that and I didn't call them. And then, have you guys ever emptied your CRM because you realize you've been too busy you're laughing, I can tell.
Yep.
You've been too busy in dispatch for like 3 weeks and you're like, I look like such a fool if I call these people back. I'm just going to start at the beginning. You ever done that?
It over. Absolutely. Yeah. I tell you what, I talk to my daughter a lot. She just started playing basketball this year. And I said, you know what, honey, we're going to celebrate the process instead of the outcome. Let's celebrate these small little wins. Let's celebrate, I got 4 free throws in a row this time. I made a good pass. I'm dribbling better, and I think as sales reps, we get pulled in so many different directions. From issues with loads to check calls to booking the loads in the cradle to grave model. And sometimes you forget to celebrate a little bit of that, the process instead of the outcome. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Stress enough too, Dan, like you said, that if we don't set that, we forget about it and we don't do it. So I can't stress enough, even myself, if I have goals to get done this week, I need to write it down somewhere, make some time for it, because if I don't write it down or don't even think about it, right, it doesn't get done. And that's, oh my gosh, that's the worst.
Yeah.
I hate that. I hate when I do that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Take that 5 minutes or 5 seconds to write down, hey, I got to follow up with this person tomorrow at that time and do it.
I send myself, I don't know if you do this, Dan, I send myself more friggin' emails at 8 o'clock at night. And my wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm emailing myself because I can't remember what I'm doing in the morning.
Yeah. My wife and I live off SIRI. I won't say it because she'll come on, but SIRI saying, set a reminder for this, set an appointment reminder, set a thing for that. And literally, I'm like, you look at, for example, you look at my schedule and that's what my day looks like today. Right? And it's like, it's one of these things where you're like, holy crap. And I'm like huge. So you notice we are sitting here and we're recording this at what, 12:30? I've got 2 green check marks. I got 4, 10, 12, 14, 16. I got 18 things left, right? So you talk about trying to overdo it, but it's like if I don't put it on paper, I can easily transfer the things that I didn't do today to tomorrow. But if I don't put it down, it's like it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting I'm gonna call it phenomenon, maybe. I don't even know what the word is, but I remember when I had a team and I realized the first time I realized like sales is mandatory. It probably took me, no joke, boys, 3 months to work with my team and my customers to say when my door's closed, don't come in unless it's like the world is going to blow up. And it's interesting. When it finally works and when it finally kicked and it allowed me for a minimum of 2 hours a day. So I would either on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I do 2 hours straight. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon. Like no matter what was going on, those 2 hours of sales calls, prospecting were done. So what I would do is I'd strategically book my meetings in those time slots. So again, if something was happening, I knew those time slots I'd be off. And when it finally clicked from a team perspective is when I sat down with the team and I said, here's the mission. This is the goal. Now, this is the goal for sales. Now, of course, there's the whole salesperson versus operations. We make the client, they keep the client. And I believe all of that. And the goal was, we're going to do 1.7 million in GP. If we hit that number, here's what you all get. But it was above and beyond that. It was also, I need you to hold me accountable. So if you see me screwing the pooch, you need to come in and tell me. If I bring in a customer that's not part of our ideal client profile, and I sat down with all 4 team members and I said, this is ideal client. And they said, well, we want to see this, this, and this too, because they're the ones that work with them all day long, right? So it's like, now you have this really clear vision of what that ideal client looks like. Now you start chasing it. And when I brought the team in to work with me on it and be hands-on, it changed everything. And so I would put an out of office and I'd say, here's my team ops. Eventually, all of my customers started calling my team members. And then if there was an issue, they would talk to me, which as a salesperson is really what you want. Like you want to maintain high level relationships as well as ground level relationships. But I find what gets us lost in that growth of our business is having like operations up to our shoulders and barely keeping our head above water to take a breath. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Especially, when you get into that cradle to grave model as a broker, where you're quoting clients or you're calling clients or you're trying to find trucks, you're in it up to your eyes,
Mm-hmm. And even if you're not in a cradle to grave, one of the hardest things to do as a salesperson is let go of your business, let somebody else manage it, because it is so difficult to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult. You work so hard to get it. I mean, How many calls, how many emails, how many follow-ups did it take just to get that person to go, yeah, I'll work with you guys, or I'll give you a shot, or here's some 5 lanes that you just won. You better don't screw them up. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You know what? It's the whole, you hit the nail on the head where you said impossible, because it does feel like it's impossible.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Absolutely. I think something to chat through that I think is always interesting, for our audience, they're always looking, well, how do you build up a pipeline? Where do you start with a pipeline? We deal with so many kind of newbies, honestly, Nate. Like when we're dealing with, like somebody comes to you and says, hey, I just started brokering. I'm a carrier. How do I build up my pipeline? What do you say to them?
Well, basically, what are you doing to understand what you're getting into, first of all? Because this isn't an easy industry. It's very stressful.
Yeah.
You have to understand what you're getting into, understand what you already know, because how can that help you just move further, right? If I got into this industry knowing what I know now, I might be ahead of a lot of these other people.
Yeah.
But if I didn't know anything about trucking and I got into it, I'm like, where do I even begin?
Yeah.
So a couple of the people that we'll talk to, it's like, well, let's start with the basic. Start with your basic types of equipment, right? And then start there. Who's using dry vans, reefers, flatbeds, right? Understand those types of equipment, and then understand the people that you're reaching out to, and how does that go together? but you have to build a pipeline because what we're talking about here with Dan, it's like you got to start writing these things down and understanding what these companies are doing and try to understand maybe some of the challenges that they're going through, because that's how you really can offer your service. How can you get through some of the challenges with them? You got to think about the team effort.
You talk about pipeline, right? One of the keys to a pipeline is consistency.
Yeah.
And a Monday you have time to sell, but then you don't have time to sell for another 2 weeks because you're involved or you're not able to. Well, let's go back to what you said, Jared. You're finding it impossible to break loose, right? Where are you to get that consistency? Like I was telling you guys before we started, right? One of the things I'm struggling with right now is my consistency in my podcast. It's like, so I started thinking of things like, okay, so if I put my earphones in while I'm driving and I just have a conversation with myself while I drive, that's a good thing. Like we're sitting here doing this podcast at lunchtime, my time, because that's my time. It's not company time. I can do what I want. You know what I mean? So it's like finding these workflows that help us manage that next level of growth the best. I'm working with a couple of people right now. They're at that 25K GP a month where they're cradle to grave. They're kind of right on the cusp of getting ops. And the conversation is, okay, how do we keep you selling as opposed to doing this? Do we combine two of you and your combined numbers gets an ops person? Like, there's always ways to do it. It's just a matter of having a conversation, because I remember the company I was at prior to starting High Performance Logistics Sales. The deal was 20 grand a month to get an ops. But at 20 grand a month, depending on what kind of freight you have, right? Because, right, we call a spade. When we start, typically it's chase freight. We're getting all the, I'll put you on a list with 10 other people. Whoever gets me a rate first wins. So you're like, Bruce Almighty with the computer trying to get things loaded and out the door. And it's like, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, shit, I let my entire pipeline go to waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's those little goals that you set that, understanding the difference between chase freight and that as other side of it, it still can be spot market freight. You don't have to have clients but they're at least willing and loyal to stay with you and quote you and deal with you.
Especially if it's inconsistent lanes, inconsistent volume. Like, unfortunately, at that point, if you don't have a carrier base, you have to play in the spot market. But you're right. There's a very big distinction, Jared, between spot market and chase freight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can get on the email list and play a weird game, and boy, that can ruin a day in productivity real quick.
Well, I often tell people, okay, you're on an email list. So do you know what your percentage is in order for you to win business? And like, well, no. I said, okay, well, ask the customer. And they're like, okay, come back. And they go 10%. I said, so if you beat the carrier by 10%, you're good. And I said, yeah. I said, okay. So just understand your next play is 30%. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you go in with a rate, that carrier beats you by 10. You have to beat them by 10. That's 20 points. Then a carrier is going to beat you by 10. Now, before you get knocked out, you have a 30% swing. So, right, you can accept that, but just know probably people are going to come back for one pass, maybe not two, but at least one. So can you take a 10% hit, right? Your charge is here, they drop it by 10%. You have to drop that by 10%. So can you take a 20-point swing on your margin? If you can't, then understand two things. One, you either take a 20-point swing, or two, this is a customer that you're going to have for maybe a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right. And
go on.
So are you willing to destroy your pipeline because of it? So long-term loss, short-term gain.
Yeah.
But you and I, all boys, we all know, right? You have numbers on the board for a couple of weeks, you lose that client, you got no numbers on the board. The first thing your manager's asking is, where's the numbers?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. I was doing business with people. We did great. We gave them great service. That's not what they care about.
Mm-hmm.
They're in it for the dollar factor. They're not in it for service. If they were in it for service, you would never got on that list anyways.
Yeah.
It's such a hard concept for so many people to grasp.
I totally agree. The other thing that I think is interesting that people, and I'd love to hear where you're at, but you know, when we talk to those sales reps, as carrier reps, as shipper reps, whoever that may be, you know, it takes longer to get a client now.
Yeah.
How many emails? How many calls did you get? You know, and I think people are losing creativity or losing steam when it comes to that third call, fifth call, 10th call, third email, fifth call, 10th call. How do you bring value, Dan, or what are your thoughts or advice to those sales reps that are in that world? Because, you know, a lot of people lose steam here. They lose it in the gap. They're good at starting, man, they can't finish. And it's so interesting to, you know, how do we go from here to this and continue to provide value? And that's something I'd love to hear your advice on.
So here's the first thing I start with is if I ever have, so there's a couple different things, right? We have the whole, you know, some people, I call them 20 times through email, voicemail, phone, before they even say, okay, let's schedule a call, right? Because what I'm asking for on every step of the way is, this is who I serve the best. Do you have time for a call? Like, that's all I want. I'm not asking for anything. I'm asking for time on their calendar. And here's the interesting thing. This goes back to the beginning of the conversation. What did we say? We never have enough time. So I realized very quickly, holy shit, I'm asking for such a, like, almost extinct thing from somebody, right? You talk to traffic managers, like, I feel like I'm doing 5 jobs, right? So now it's, what do you do best? And how can you explain that in one sentence in order for them to say, okay, I'm going to invest one of the scarcest commodities on the planet, my time, with this person. What's my ROI? So I've approached it in just that sense. This is what I do best. If you're not there, if you're not focusing on this, just let me know. I'll connect with you in a few months. If you are, I would like to take 3 minutes of your time, and I will literally put a stopwatch on my computer. 3 minutes, and I better get to the friggin' point fast, because I look at it, and I obviously, in speaking with a lot of people that are customers, it's, you know, Dan, if I were to answer every call, I would never get anything done, and I wouldn't have a job. And I think salespeople in general, I think, are just approaching it with the fact, and so here's the thing, right? You have salespeople pre-COVID, and you have salespeople, COVID salespeople. And I really do, and not to, you're laughing, eh, Jared? Not to bring up the pandemic again, but I think salespeople during the pandemic have a total different opinion, and the impact of the last 24 months is hitting them very differently than people that were in it before the pandemic, and maybe have been in it since like 2008, 9, where they've seen a fall, a rise, 16, seen a fall, a rise, 2018 into 19, seen that roller coaster ride, right? Like, during the pandemic, boys, you had a phone, you were making money. That's the reality of it. And now it's the complete opposite. You have a phone, you're almost getting depression.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck.
Yeah. Jared and I talk a lot about this, because he's obviously, just like yourself, has been around this industry enough to see a lot of these swings. And, you know, Jared keeps telling me weekly, man, he's like, people just need to sell differently nowadays. It's different than it was back then. And, you know, we're starting to see that, and we're trying to get it out there more. And you're right. We need to put ourselves in those shipping manager's shoes or the CEO's shoes, and understand that time is precious. And like you said, how can I get my point across in that 1 minute? And that's what we're hopefully to bring some value today, is help you guys get that 1 minute, call it down, and hopefully get some time.
Yeah.
You know, boys, I'm going to throw that back at you, because I think it's a great point, and I'd love to hear from both of you before we close out the show. Like, what is it you're doing today that's changed? And what do you know, to the person out there that's really struggling, what do you guys should suggest that they do right away?
Yeah, for me personally, we got to do more research and understand who we're calling. So we talk about building a pipeline. Build your pipeline, but don't just put a contact name. Don't just put an email. It's much more than that, in my opinion. It's understanding what their business is all about and what could their challenges be, and just be ready to ask maybe more questions. You know, Jared says this all the time. You're only as good as the questions that you ask. So don't hurry up to try to get off the phone. Maybe ask another question. Maybe ask them why. But that's me personally. I hear a lot of this from the people I talk with, and I get to pick this guy's brain a lot. Because like I said, he's been in this industry for so long, and he sees a lot of that. And he's been through it. So
I love the trenches. And I've seen the trenches in several different aspects of the industry. And I tell you what, if you are using the phone right now, you better be wildly direct in 30 seconds or less. And when I mean wildly direct, I'm talking, you're calling a guy in Des Moines and you're saying, hey, we focus on I-35 straight north and south. Is there any fit for us? Let's have a conversation, right? If you're winning through emails, those emails they better be very similar to that. 1-2 sentences asking for a meeting. And you're right. I think people are looking for social presence. I think people are wanting to find different ways to build trust. How many people? I don't trust anybody. Anymore. You're just like, oh, there's all these double brokers. There's all this fraudulent things. Who are you supposed to trust? And I think the only way you can do that, and even in our particular case, people come to us because all of a sudden they're like, I feel like I can trust him. I feel like I can trust her. And so in today's world where you got to pound the emails, you got to pound the phones, I think it's important that you continue to work through that social impact, even if that's not your cup of tea. I don't want to make videos. Okay, well, how about you just write something and work through it? And I think that's wildly important right now, is that you look at little things and say, did that work? No, it didn't. Okay, let me change it a little bit. Let me change it a little bit. Let me change it a little bit. We don't need to be drastic with things. You don't have to go from this to this. Let's just adjust. I play a lot of darts. And it's interesting when I'm throwing, I used to adjust and I would be like, okay, I just hit a single 20. And then I'm like, okay, I just need to tear this down the board to get down to a triple. And I adjust a little bit and a little bit. And all of a sudden now I can hit triple 20s until they come home. And it's really interesting you need to do that same mentality when it comes to your pipeline. Just adjust a little bit and try to get to that point where you're like, now I'm hitting my stride. And if you don't stay consistent, it's pointless. There's no reason to even do it. You have to stay consistent. It's just going to take a longer period of time.
Yeah, and you have to add to that, you have to do something, because nothing's really going to come to you. There might be some rare, options or opportunities when a shipper might call you because you're local, but you really got to do something and pick up that phone, or try something else if it's not working. Yeah, because you have to do something. Nothing's going to come to you.
They're not coming. They're not coming. Yeah, they're not coming for sure.